The notion that we've lived before is obviously very, very radical. And so part of what I was doing was trying to work out how can we assess the validity of the claims for reincarnation. I don't think we're finding out anything about the paranormal. I don't think we're finding out anything about whether or not we actually live in a previous life. We're finding out a great deal about psychology, about the way in which people can fool us and we can fool ourselves.
But what if there were reincarnation cases that would not ultimately rely only on the memories of young children? Jim Tucker is on his way to another case, from a category of cases that his critics will find much harder to disprove.
The more that the cases were found, one started to come up with birthmarks and birth defects, and we found that in many cases there was a striking correlation between the birthmarks on the children and wounds that the previous personalities had. And we've been able to track down autopsy reports or medical records to make sure that in fact there was a match there.
For the first time, these birthmarks provide a physically verifiable piece of evidence suggesting reincarnation.
We don't have a lot of American cases that have the birthmarks or birth defects along with the memories. We do have some, but it's unusual, so we certainly like to investigate all those that we can.
And Jim Tucker is about to visit one of these cases. He is boarding a flight to Florida to meet a boy who remembers being a New York policeman killed in a hail of gunfire.
When I was big, I was a police officer. I walked into a store one night. They were bad guys, too. They shot me dead.
Give your money now.
Pensacola, the home of Maria Hagedorn. She is the mother of two children, 2-year-old Mia and 5-year-old Ian. Ian is a very sick boy.
What kind of dress do you like to wear?
Maria Hagedorn's son suffers from a very rare heart disease. If he exerts himself too much, he struggles for air and faints. Trips to the family cardiologist are frequent. Continued observation a must. Little Ian had 6 major heart operations before he turned 4.
He was a big, healthy 8.5-pound baby, and they took him off. They said to take a bath, give him a bath. And they never came back. Over an hour went by, so I sent my husband off to find the baby. And he came back quite a bit later with 2 doctors, and they were all crying, very visibly shaken, which I knew that the news was not good.
The doctors told Maria that Ian would not live through his first day. Only an emergency operation would save his life. 6 hours after his birth, Ian underwent major heart surgery.
Ian had underdevelopment of the pulmonary valve, which is the artery right here we see in this drawing, and that caused the right side of his heart not to develop as well. And what that leads to is a lack of oxygen in his blood. So it's a condition where he is essentially suffocating because not enough oxygen is delivered to the brain and to the rest of the body.
Ian's surgery went well. After almost 9 hours, a team of doctors managed to repair the valve. But the underdevelopment of the right side of his heart would take time and more operations. Ian's life is still at risk today. What brings Jim Tucker to this case is an event that took place over a year before Ian was born.
My dad was a police officer, and he walked into Radio Shack, and he could tell something was going on. Two guys up at the front desk pulled a machine gun out of their overcoat and pointed it at the manager. And my dad pulled his revolver and said, "Drop your weapons, I'm a police officer." And somebody was shooting him quite immediately after he said that.
Jim Tucker and Maria Hagedorn review her father's autopsy report. Eerily, the cause of death jumps out at anyone reading this report. Maria's father died from a ruptured pulmonary artery caused by a gunshot wound, the same artery that is causing Ian's misery. But something else happened that seemed even stranger to Ian's mother.
The first time was when he was about 3, and I was doing some work in my office, and he was making quite a bit of noise, and I had threatened him with a spanking if he didn't quiet down. And he stood there and looked at me and said, "When you were a little girl and I was your daddy, lots of times you were bad and I never spanked you," which just kind of blew me away. He didn't get a spanking.
And then Ian began to talk more about his grandfather.
Growing up, we had 2 cats, a black cat and a white cat, and the black cat was Maniac, and the white cat was Boston. So one day I was doing something, and Ian came over to me and he said, "Mom, when you were a little girl and I was your daddy, what was my cat's name?" And I said, "Maniac?" And he said, "No, the white one." And I said, "Boston?" And he said, "I used to call him Boss, right?" So he knew the color of the cats, and he knew the nickname that only my dad used to call Boston.
Maria collected more and more stories like this one from Ian. She is now convinced that Ian is her father reborn. It isn't only the stories, but the physical evidence, the correlation between Ian's heart disease and her father's mortal wound, that has removed all doubt from her mind.
Much of these cases often involves memories and statements and behaviors. The birthmarks are something that's completely objective, and it's something that is beyond memory or beyond chance.
Maybe Ian's memory is fooling him. Perhaps his random statements are connected to his grandfather by pure luck. But it's the combination of memory and physical evidence that is so convincing.
I didn't want to go back, but God just gave me to you.
God gave you to your mom?
Yes.
Even though you didn't want to come back?
The case of Ian Hagedorn demands the question, what does all this evidence mean?
There are obviously huge questions here which we haven't even begun to try to answer, such as, is there a soul? If so, what does that term even mean? How does it get carried over from one life to the next? When you look at all these cases, you can certainly focus on the weaknesses if you choose to. But I think there's also enough here so that if you choose, you can step back and say that there may just be something remarkable going on.
If Dr. Tucker is right, the memories of all these children could mean that death may just be a road to another life.